Hello and welcome to the AskWeldon Show, episode 278. Today's title is Burnout in Esport, Roommate Life Advice, and Tips on Mindfulness and Breaking into Esport. Hello, my name is Weldon, and I'm a sports psychology trainer with over 9 years of experience training athletes in traditional sport and in esport. I have a master's of sport science in sport and exercise psychology, and I'm also a swim coach. In this video, I take questions. I'm going to answer 3 pre-recorded questions about sports psychology or kind of anything else that I am an expert in. And you can call in your own questions. Check out the link down below. I use an app called Anchor. It's also a website. I think you can use your computer to do it. And it's the place where I host my podcast, and you can find links to the podcast on all of the various podcast listening networks there. And then you can call in your own question. Don't worry about any question being wrong or dumb or technical difficulties. I just won't use it if it's a bad question or if it sounds really bad. But in general, people who are using their phones to call in, it kind of sounds like they juice up the audio a bit. It sounds like they make your voices sound really nice. So feel free to use the app to call in. And without further ado, let's jump into the first question from Adrian.
And then I try to let it go by imagining it. Hello, Weldon. Thank you for answering my previous question. I now have an issue when I meditate is that I cannot fully let my thoughts go away. So when I meditate, I realize I'm stuck in a thought, and then I try to let it go by imagining it go away through the flow of a river. And but the thought doesn't fully go away. I still see it, and even if I try to continue meditating, I will catch myself in that thought once more. Do you have any advice of how to fully let go of a thought? Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Adrian. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I haven't recorded this podcast for has it been like half a year, maybe a year? Anyway, it's been since 2018 since I was churning it out every single day. But I think I got it fixed halfway through. Let me know if you guys can hear it properly. Adrian's question is essentially, how can I not let go of my thought? If you have done mindfulness before, you know that the general gist is that you're not supposed to get caught up in cogitation, in like just these cyclical thought patterns where you're just thinking and you're not even aware that you're thinking and you're just kind of like pondering on things and you're not aware of your surroundings. Instead, you're supposed to focus on things that are in the moment. So one of the best things that you can focus on is, for example, your sense of touch or your sense of touch related to your breath, because when you're breathing, things are moving around and it's different every single time, or on sound, or on things that you can see, although most of the time people do mindfulness with their eyes closed to eliminate that, so they can focus more on sound and touch. But you could do things that you smell, or you could do the thoughts in your mind. It's just usually easier to do a sensory input because senses are always changing. There's always a new thing popping up. It's pretty easy to focus on the new thing over and over and over again and use that as a tool to forget about previous stuff than it is to like do that with thoughts in your brain. So here's what I would recommend, Adrian. First of all, I would think about you thinking about it. So the first step is to, it sounds like what you're doing this already, is to be metacognitive about it. So to be aware when you are paying attention to it and pay attention to yourself, paying attention to it instead. Because that will lead to other thoughts. That'll lead to thoughts like, why is that so sticky to me? This is really interesting. Like, why am I fascinating about? What parts of this thought I seem to be latching onto? Essentially, I think the appropriate mindset for mindfulness, if you were to put a word to it, would be curiosity. You're always curious about what is happening and what's happening next and what's happening now. Some bad like mindsets for mindfulness might be things like frustration or annoyance at your own brain's stubbornness, or these various kinds of like mindsets where you're just like kind of pissed off at yourself because you think you're doing it wrong, or you're bored because it's something that's repetitive. I think that curiosity captures the kind of like essence of the way that you should try to craft your emotions in a way to approach this blocking point that you think that you have. And then I would encourage you to think of your ability to move past a sticky thought more as a focusing thing, such as focusing on the sense of touch that you have, or the sense of smell that you have, or the sense of sounds that you have more fully. Get more fully into the thing that you're focusing on, and that will kind of like push other thoughts and emotions out of your mind as you are focusing heavier and heavier on the aspect of your focus. And you might do this using your eyes. You might say that it's literally not enough to have my sense of touch and to have my sense of sound because there's just not enough stuff to focus on. So I need to add touch. We usually cut out touch because it's so overwhelmingly sensual, I guess is the word. But in this case, you might say like, well, I need a staring object. So you might like put some very interesting thing in the middle of the room, or you might pull up kind of like, what are those screensavers that iTunes used to use where it was this ever-changing, thing that was responding to music. You could even put up music, but try to put up some interesting music. I personally prefer listening to, for example, classical music as opposed to gongs and things like that. But gongs and things like that are great because they're much more limited in terms of how much like stuff they're shoving into your brain at any time, like how complicated the music is. So they leave more space for reflection. But yeah, I would say try to maybe up the amount of sensory input you're getting through your touch, sound, or sight in order to try to encourage your ability to focus on something else until the thought fades away. Okay? And give that a shot and then call back in if that helped or not. Working through meditation is a incredibly individual thing, so it's really hard for me to give advice that is particular to you unless you include a lot of details. You included a fair amount here, so that was useful. And it's also pretty hard to do mindfulness incorrectly if you're, let's say, like strong enough to do it quote unquote correctly. I put it in quotes because there are a lot of meditation teachers who say, oh, you can't do it incorrectly and you can't mess up with yoga. It's just where you are. But actually, I think that that's not true. You can do mindfulness wrong. You can do meditation wrong. You can do yoga wrong. And there is probably an objectively right way to do it. There might be an objectively right way for you to do it. But I believe and I like to perceive that when you are pursuing mastery, it is because you hold to the ideal that there is an essentially right way for me to do this, some sort of like better way than now, and that pursuit is enjoyable. It's just that we want that pursuit to be enjoyable, not frustrating. You don't want to think about it as something that you cannot do, but rather as something that you aspire to do. Let's put it that way. So yeah, give that a shot, Adrian. Let me know how it works out. And we will move on to the next question. Nope, wait, I have some announcements. Okay, so I'm trying to put in a different structure for the announcements here. I'm not just going to be talking about announcements in my everyday life. I will do a little like blurb of my channel here instead of updating you on what's happening, because usually the way that the show goes is oh, I haven't done it for a year, so I have a lot to talk about. Too much to go in a little announcement section. And then, oh, I'm doing it tomorrow, and nothing has happened since yesterday, so there's nothing to talk about. So let me just put a very quick and swift channel blurb here for people who are just discovering the show, and then we can move on to question number 2. So on my channel, you can check out this Ask Weldon show, my podcast, where you can call in and get your specific questions answered live or off a recording. You'll also find my reaction videos and commentary about esport and sport. If you want to book a training session with me, you'll find me on gamersensei.com at my profile link down below, which I'll include in the description of the video, as well as gamersensei.com/senseis/mindgamesweldon. All right, let's jump into the question number 2 from, who's this from? Tony.
Hey, Weldon. I was wondering, as a future consultant for mental performance, I'm wondering, what do you see as the biggest challenge or challenges when getting into the esport industry and working with professional teams?
All right, short, sweet, to the point. Let me think about this for a second. I think probably the biggest challenge is the lack of jobs. So let's say that you want to be, for example, a performance coach for a professional esport team. So let's just take League of Legends, for example. There are 10 jobs in the North American continent for that. Realistically, maybe the field caps out at 20 if you add like other esports that are kind of making enough money for this field. And then in Europe, that means that you are looking at maybe like 20 or 25 positions total. So the biggest challenge facing breaking into esport as an industry is that right now it is primarily an entertainment industry. It's primarily focused on the top peak of the entertainment industry. So like just the part that is like making money. There's not hundreds and thousands of sports leagues below that are monetized well at the local setting. And so you're just looking at, maybe 50 jobs globally, period, in this field. And that means that you have to compete with everybody else who wants to do this and be one of not only a better one, right? Maybe even in the top 50 in terms of your skill level, but also super, super lucky and well connected in order to get the job in the first place. So I don't think that, like let's say that one of the jobs opens up this year and then somebody good gets it, or somebody who like can sell themselves well to their bosses and never gets fired despite like not really having much of an impact. Well, they might hold the job for 2 years. You might not give her, you might not get a chance to apply for 2 more years. So I think honestly, like as a performance consultant, the most challenging thing to breaking into esport as an industry is that it's an entertainment focused, kind of on the level of, traditional pro sport that is viewed on TV, or you'd think like professional wrestling, like that is the part that is monetized right now. But all the leagues underneath it that in traditional sport have money. So the NCAAs, the city leagues, the club leagues, like those don't have money, and the teams are not going to be hiring you at a salary. It's going to be like just like it is in traditional sport, where you hire a kid, a 16-year-old volunteer to coach your local soccer team for $15 an hour. It's not really like a thing. So that breaks into my second piece of advice, which is you should focus on individual training. You should go to, for example, gamersensei.com, and you should start coaching people. You should just coach people as an individual. You should look to coach teams on a volunteer basis, unless you get up to the pro level, and you should look to coach individuals on a volunteer moving into a paid basis as a like a one-on-one trainer kind of thing. Like you might go to a gym and you might hire a physical trainer for you as a gym goer. That is going to be the sweet spot in esport for individual performance consultants or mental skills trainers, where essentially you're just like the equivalent of a physical trainer in a gym, but for a video game player. And the place that players congregate for stuff like that is websites like gamersensei.com or the Reddit forums of the games, of the improvement forums for the games. So, for example, there's competitive Overwatch, and there's the League of Legends subreddit, which is focused on, the pro scene. But then what is the one I'm looking on the internet right now? Sorry, YouTube. There's a League of Legends community that is focused on getting better. I'm a member. I cannot remember what it is. I can't believe that. Maybe it's in my list here. Well, Overwatch University. Oh, Summoner School. That's it. Summoner School. Summoner School is the forum where people are aspiring to improve, and a place where you can like make your blog posts, where you give people tips, or where you can read a bunch of stuff about what it is that people are concerned about. They have like 570,000 subscribers, it looks like right here. So that is a place. That is my advice on how it is to break into esport as a personal trainer. That is the mindset that I would take. And if you get lucky and you end up as a pro teams coach, like kudos to you. All right. What was I going to put here in between question 2 and 3? Help me out here. I remember. Make sure to check out my app in progress at mindgames.gg. This is a very successful video course that I decided to appify. And although it's in the midst of becoming an app, you can still access the old video course from the sidebar of the app once you're inside. And you can progress through the video course like as you could before. And I try to get updates in every month or so, but since it's like a self-funded app project, it's slow going. But that is an essentially a way to kind of understand what it is that I do and get what I teach without doing a personal session with me. So make sure to check that out at mindgames.gg. All right, third question from Ryan.
Hey Weldon, I'm currently in a living situation with my brother and my father that allows me to only have to work a minuscule amount and to be able to put most of my time and effort towards my passion, working a job that might not necessarily net me a lot of money now, but as I continue to work in my passion could net me money in the future. However, living in this current situation has been difficult. Things like trying to stream can be hard because of lack of internet that's good enough. Trying to solve that problem by, say, upgrading the internet seems to be met with argumentation and fights, when having bad internet's also met with those arguments and fights. And I can't help but feeling like moving out might solve a lot of these problems. However, that would mean sacrificing a lot of my passion and not having to work a better job to make more money to be able to afford to live on my own. So I was wondering if you had any advice for me moving forward, wanting to pursue my passion.
All right, thank you for the question. So I have general life advice about this just simply because I know people who have lived in similar situations, and I have made similar decisions multiple times in my life. I would question a lot moving out and using the excuse to move out to be like you want more space and you want, and if you just could move out and if you could get your own space, then you would be able to do this thing that you want to do. There are other ways to tackle hurdles around content creation. For example, instead of streaming, what you should do is focus on 15 or 10-minute videos on YouTube. See if you can break through or build audience that way. You can also just upload videos to Twitch. You don't need to actually stream them live. So you could upload 15-minute segments there. If you were doing something like what I'm doing, like a podcast, you can use Anchor.fm, the app, to essentially podcast produce on your phone. You can walk around the city. You can walk to a quiet park. You can walk to a forest. You can produce an audio-only version of your show, which you can stream and monetize on the Anchor platform. You can get a microphone like pretty much any run-of-the-mill external microphone like this that you can position. You can even use one that's attached to your headset, and you can get something like Banana Voice Meter, which is a free audio application for Windows that allows you to change the gain on your input. You can drop the gain very, very low, and then you can swallow the microphone, literally put it in your mouth like this, and then you can have somebody who is basically 5 feet away talking loudly, watching a movie, an action movie, and none of the sound will get picked up by your microphone. So I was using that to stream when I was working in Berlin, in Germany, and there was stuff happening in the hallway all the time, and I kind of set up my mic setup on my desk right there, and it didn't matter if people walked into the room, walked through, whatever. The recording was essentially, of course, there's all sorts of problems that come up with that too, right? Like if you accidentally lean away, you all of a sudden get no sound. Stuff like that. But yeah, so I would say the same advice I give to people who are buying workout equipment. If you're buying a piece of workout equipment because you're like, this is the thing that's finally going to get me in shape and I'm going to get a good workout routine, so I'm going to justify spending $100 on this workout machine, it's not going to change anything for you. The habits that you build and the ways that you overcome the hurdles that you have to kind of do what you want already, if you get an Instant Pot, you're not going to instantly become an amazing meal prepper if you're not already meal prepping, and then it's just an extra tool you're using to kind of do what you want to do but better. If you're not already doing it, then changing your situation a little bit is not going to, even if it does make it easier to do, and you are able to do it the moment that something goes wrong or there's a hurdle in place with it, it's probably going to fall off as a habit. So what I would challenge you to do is to kind of like window shop the dessert aisle. You should work on the habits that you want to have going forward, and you should work on like a minor setup of kind of like what you want to do, and you should maintain the really inexpensive and good living situation that you have while you're socking away money. And you should aspire to essentially produce the content you want to produce and work into the hobby that you want to work. And you should take advantage of the freedom from finances that you have to like all in on the labor that you need to do and the habits that you want to build. And then you reward yourself when that's starting to kind of like turn and the dials are starting to turn. You reward yourself with upgrades to what is currently working and what you're able to like sustain. And that does not fall into the worldview of a lot of people on the internet who say like, no, if you build it, they will come. Like, I needed this setup, and once I got it, like everything was smooth sailing. And that may be true. It may work out for some people, but I think that I cannot give that advice. I can't give the advice to like spend a bunch of money, put yourself in a red line situation, limit your freedom and capabilities to use your time however you like, and get more equipment, because then if you do all that, you'll finally be able to focus on what you want to do and like actually do it. I think that that's maybe a good optimistic like mindset that will work for some people, and for some people it will pay off. But I think most of the time that's just not going to happen, and so I can't really advise it myself. So what I'm saying is I'm not shutting you down if that's the path that you're eventually going to take, but I am recommending that you don't take it, and especially that you don't take it off of my advice if you are going to put yourself in a more strenuous position financially. Yeah, so what I have found in my own experience is that the things that I do and that I'm doing now are the things that I'm going to keep doing when I improve my situation or get a new camera, for example. And the things that I am not doing now, and I'm not like disciplining myself now or problem solving around or just making them happen no matter what, I have never in my life spent a bunch of money or put myself in a more fiscally dangerous situation to accomplish them and then had them magically be easy and do them. It was always internal in the first place. And all you have to do is look around at people who are in much worse situations than you that are producing things that are similar to what you want to do. Yeah, so that's my advice, Ryan, and I hope that you are able to find a way forward there. And if this question's answer was so late that you've already moved out, go you, and good luck. Hope that I can watch your podcast soon. All right, let's jump into the fourth and final question of the show.
Hi, Weldon. Leo from France here. And in one of your shows, you talk about training, overtraining, burnout, rest. And I was wondering, how do you put a system like that in place with your player? And what do you monitor? Is it the sleep? Is it the mood? Is it the performance over a couple of days, weeks? And do you have any books or studies I can look for and read so I can really understand that subject and be able to do a good job to coach my player with it? Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you, Leo. So the question is, how do I measure my students or my players' burnout, and then how can I, as a coach, make sure that I'm keeping like on the front of that burnout train? And the answer, unfortunately, is not very simple. Yes, there's a lot of research and there's a lot of books out there that you can read, but they're all mostly about athletics. There's zero research in esport yet. Most of the stuff that applies to workplace burnout also applies to esports or video game burnout, but not enough of it. Some of the stuff that applies to athletic burnout also applies to esport burnout, but you have to really understand the fundamental causes of burnout and how the research is structured to get good takeaways. So I would actually not recommend reading research on burnout, because unless you know the field well and you know biology well, you're not going to get a lot out of reading research, because the takeaways are not going to be interpreted correctly for you, for your situation. It's the same problem with books. I also, although I don't really have very many to recommend you, but if you do read about workplace burnout in general, you might be able to put together like a cookbook of tools that you would use to then reduce burnout. Because a lot of the stuff that helps reduce burnout or recover from burnout is applicable across all fields. So the things that you would do to get better, to recover from burnout as a soccer player, as a computer programmer, as a basketball player, are all pretty applicable, if you generalize them, of course. Now, in terms of what it is that I track for biomarkers, I think that heart rate variability and injury rate are the best biomarkers available. Injury rate is less applicable in esport because it's a very, very low injury sport. It's like much easier to measure burnout in soccer off of injury rate than it is in esport. But what people forget is that mistakes in game are essentially injuries. If you're playing Call of Duty and you just straight up die, people are like, oh, I died. They don't count that as like I twisted my ankle, right? Whereas if you were playing soccer, you might have twisted your ankle during the little skirmish that you just had, but you just don't know it because your ankle doesn't hurt, right? So as a coach, you kind of like watch your players and you get a feel for when they're playing well and when they're playing badly. And when you see people playing badly, you count those as injuries. And when they make like dumb mistakes, you count those as twisting their ankles or like running into the pole when they aren't looking, not the pole, running into another player when they aren't looking, or making these kind of like mistakes that if they were on a sports pitch would turn into an acute injury, like a sudden accidental injury if it was dangerous. So injury rate, heart rate variability, two of the best biomarkers. Sleep and sleep quality is also good to measure, but with heart rate variability. So there's a lot of instruments now that are figuring that out, and they're essentially only turning towards heart rate variability as a way to measure stress and use stress in the body. And so I think that it's kind of widely recognized in the field that this is the best biomarker that we can currently access. There might be a future where we could measure what are the neurotransmitter levels. We could measure things in the brain that would give us insight into burnout, but currently we are nowhere near even understanding burnout in the brain in terms of neurotransmitter levels, much less being able to like actually do something about it or measure it. So just so you know, like we're essentially like looking through some murky water, seeing the shape of a whale or a shark, and then trying to identify the species and what's going on by the fact that we see a shadow in the water. So that's our current understanding of burnout in the brain. And it's simply because we can't measure the brain in fine-grained detail enough to kind of like figure out what's going on here. And there's a psychological component as well as a physical component. And then psychology is still not purely a physical science, simply because we haven't been able to map the brain and study it enough to turn it into what Newton did with gravity when he turned it from something that you just observed to something that you could measure and write formulas about. So that my advice for burnout is to really look into heart rate variability, make sure to study your players' injuries, adapt recovery techniques from wherever you can find them because they should be applicable widely across the field, and just understand that you want to essentially push your players up to the point where they are overreaching, they're kind of like overtraining, and then dial back before they get fully burned out. So there is a difference between overreaching and then starting to fray at the edges versus full-on amotivational burnout. And the biggest indicator you have of that is that when people are just going through the motions and they look inside of their chest or whatever, or their stomach, and all they see is like a big empty hole where their motivation should be, and it's just gone. It's like as if they feel nothing there. That is true and real burnout. Okay, that's when you've gone like to the point of no return and you've actually burned out a person, and it takes anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months to even half a year to kind of like salve that wound or to recover from full-fledged burnout, at least according to the research. Obviously, there are outliers to those numbers, but I'm citing you the main statistics. And then your job is essentially to stop that before it happens, but not to not to try to avoid all burnout at all, because the indications of that are essentially the indications that you are appropriately overreaching in your training. Unfortunately, esports is a pretty low injury sport, so you don't get a lot of physical indications that you're training too much. You kind of have to look in the game and measure heart rate variability and general stress. And then also, it could be that you literally cannot train enough to get burned out. If you're doing school and you can only train 3 or 4 hours a day, it's probably literally impossible for you as an amateur player to even get to the point of burnout from video games. Like, you might burn out generally on life because you're trying to do studies and school, politics of your friend group, dealing with your family, prepping and your meals and dealing with your fitness, and then also doing video games. You might just burn out like on life. But it's not because you're playing 8 hours of video game and you're dialing it back to 4 hours of video games, right? It's because you're just stuffing your life full of too much stuff. So that is what you have to consider if you're coaching amateurs who are putting in 3 to 5 days a week. If you're coaching pros who are only playing their video game and that's it, then you can measure their video game time and the thing that they're doing there as the main metric of their life, and you can moderate the things they're doing otherwise, like the gym or a social life, etc. But if you have somebody who's chock full of just normal everyday life, then burnout is a multifaceted puzzle, and you got to make sure that you include all of the pieces, not just the thing that they're going to get burned out on, which is the training on the top that kind of pushes them over the edge, right? Okay. That's the show for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to check it out on my YouTube channel tomorrow when it gets uploaded. And call in your questions. Anchor.fm/Weldon Green. Anchor.fm/Weldon Green. You can use it on your phone or on your computer to call in the questions. And make sure to book a session with me if you want an individual session on Gamer Sensei. Or check out my course/app on mindgames.gg, my website. And I will see you all tomorrow.